A man who was entered into the UFC Hall of Fame after only 2 fights and became one of their first heavyweight champions. He won the King of Pancrase title 3 times and built a legendary sports career. For fans of mixed martial arts, Bas Rutten needs no introduction. In this video, we will show you the best finishes performed by the legendary fighter. And if you like this video, please don't forget to punch the like button, as it really helps us to develop this channel. In 1996, a fight against Katsuomi Inagaki, a strong average fighter who was remarkable in the fact that for many fights, no one was able to knock him out. Bas wanted to change that. From the bell, Rutten's high kick hit the Japanese fighter even through a block. He follows with a blow to the body. Inagaki makes a lucky takedown, but Bas immediately catches him in a stranglehold. Inagaki grabs the ropes and gets deducted a point according to the Pancrase rules. Bas catches Katsuomi with a punch, but the Japanese fighter transfers to the ground. A few minutes later, Rutten delivers a kick to the liver, followed by a liver punch. The fighters transfer to the ground where more heavy blows to the liver follow. The fighters rise to their feet, and a few minutes later, Rutten delivers another devastating kick to the liver, dropping Inagaki to the canvas. Amazingly, Katsuomi stands up, overcoming the pain and one of the hardest blows to the liver that we've ever seen. Just listen to the sound.
See, and now I go boom.
Bas raises his right hand to distract the Japanese fighter and delivers another kick to the liver. It's clear that Katsuomi is in great pain, but if you thought he wouldn't get up, then you were wrong. There are no weak fighters in Pancrase. Rutten decides to throw a high kick to the head, followed by another liver kick, but Inagaki is saved with a clinch. Seconds later, Rutten hits with a knee to the body when the fighters are standing up, one of the signature moves of the Dutch puncher. This is the end of their fight. Rutten wins by TKO. Bas beat the best fighters at their peak, but let's take a look back at Bas Rutten's debut. The first Pancrase show in history had real fights, even before the UFC. Rutten's debut match was a showdown with the hefty pro wrestler Ryushi Yanagasawa, who was inexperienced in MMA, but considered himself a puncher. Well, let's see. The Japanese fighter throws a low kick, but Bas counters with a high kick and a powerful palm strike that knocks Yanagasawa down. The Japanese begins to suspect that this is not the same as in pro wrestling. Yanagasawa stands up, but Rutten's frenzied series of punches crushes his opponent. It's a knockout. Bas Rutten's debut was the most impressive fight of the first Pancrase show and made the audiences realize that these fights were real and not Japanese pro wrestling. Yanagasawa faced a tough Dutch kickboxer and simply wasn't ready for that kind of power. However, he didn't give up, and in the future would fight Mirko Krokop in K1. Still, Bas Rutten was the star that night. Pancrase was created when 2 young pro wrestlers, Masakatsu Funaki and Minoru Suzuki, became unhappy with the current trend of wrestling in Japan, which featured showmanship and style over technical ability. They decided to form their own promotion. The rules and surroundings were much the same as Bushido wrestling, but the matches were played for real, which caused a great sensation. Funaki and Suzuki traveled the world in search of talent, and one day met Bas Rutten in a Dutch gym and convinced him to join their new organization. Rutten's second fight was the robust Takaku Fuke. Bas opens with a heavy front kick. The Japanese responds with a pass, but Bas moves to the floor and uses a guillotine. Experienced Takaku quickly went to the mount and performed an armbar, but Bas literally dragged the Japanese across the ring and grabbed the rope. Bas has a point deducted. Fouquet knows what he has to do. He can only win the fight by wrestling. But Boss was on alert, and at the right moment, he delivers a knee to the liver. It was a kickboxing-style knockout. Fouquet was unable to recover. Boss Rutten noted that he deliberately struck his opponent while he was exhaling, so that the blow was even more destructive. In 1994, the Dutchman faced a fight with Vernon White. Vernon White was a Taekwondo coach and champion, but compared to Boss in MMA, he was an amateur. Vernon tries to attack Rutten with a heavy front kick. However, Boss is able to perform a takedown into a guillotine hold, which quickly finishes his opponent. This is despite the fact that Vernon trained grappling for a year and he and Boss were on roughly equal terms. Rutten admitted that in the first couple years, the guillotine was the only thing he could do on the ground. In the same year, Rutten fought one of the founders of Pancrase, Minoru Suzuki, who was, at the time, undefeated. Boss was nervous before this fight due to the fact that Suzuki was a very experienced fighter. Minoru enters the ring in his trademark bad boy style. The fans adored him, and at the time the stocky Japanese had already managed to beat Vernon White, Maurice Smith, and even Ken Shamrock. In a world of very tough and violent fighters, even today, Suzuki is considered the king of catch wrestling. If we had to bet on this fight, then we would not bet on Rutten that evening. Suzuki circles around the ring, and Boss takes aim, realizing that his opponent should not be allowed to close the distance. A high kick and a palm strike dropped the Japanese wrestler. Knockdown. Minoru realized that it was time to stop playing puncher. He catches Boss by the leg, hoping to move to the ground, but forgot that a puncher like Boss would not miss his chance and continue the attack. Rutten moves to finish the fight, but Suzuki was on the alert. A nice takedown. The Japanese had an impressive amateur career in wrestling, and Boss himself admitted that Minoru was a master. The Japanese fighter easily goes to the side mount. Rutten punches him in the back of the head, but Suzuki was unfazed and performed a headbutt. Boss is on the alert and he understands that the slightest mistake in the ground with Minoru would cost him the fight. However, Suzuki relaxed and let Boss get to his feet, and that was a mistake. Rutten's body knee strike ended the Japanese fighter's winning streak and left the local fans in shock. Rutten, who was weak on the ground, won on his feet. Ken Shamrock said the reason for Suzuki's defeat was only two factors: his smaller size and gaps in his striking technique, which Minoru never made up for until the end of his career. Manabu Yamada was an extremely dangerous fighter in MMA back in the late 80s in the Shuto promotion before the birth of UFC. In the fight with Yamada, the difference in height and power worked in favor of Boss Rutten. There is a hard palm strike from Yamada, but Rutten also manages to get in some hits. The fight moves to the ground, where the Dutchman gets a back mount. The experienced Japanese fighter manages to get out, but he immediately falls into another trap, where Rutten clamped an arm triangle choke from half guard. Rutten clung to his opponent like a python until Yamada passed out. This is the old school submission. Boss was not happy about the victory, but in the end, Yamada was okay. Of particular note is Rutten's trilogy with Jason DeLucia, the MMA Kung Fu fighter. Young Jason was already training at the Lion's Den facility. In his debut, he caught the more experienced Masakatsu Funaki on a mistake, so he was confident that he could beat Boss. We all know that DeLucia's signature move is the side kick with the leading foot, but this simply does not work on Rutten. There is a good transfer to the ground from Jason, but Rutten did not want to risk fighting in a grapple and grab the ropes. What follows is a repeated sluggish side kick from Jason and a killer high kick from Boss. Jason tries to move the fight to the ground again, but moves too slowly. The referee separates the fighters but does not notice that Jason is grabbing the ropes. Rutten points this out to the referee, and then the fight continues. The next transfer to the ground was even more clumsy than the last one. Boss saw him and led with the guillotine choke, ending the fight. It was evident that DeLucia realized that he was not able to withstand Boss's punches and kickboxing skills, and was looking to save himself by transferring to the ground. Unfortunately, it didn't go his way. After the loss, Jason never gave up seeking a revenge match, believing Boss was just lucky the first time. In the second fight, there's a failed attempt to move to the ground by Jason DeLucia, followed by a slightly clumsy attack to which Boss responds with a heavy middle kick. But Jason catches him and succeeds in moving him to the ground. DeLucia grabs Boss's leg. Rutten responds in kind. Now, in a wrestling fight, Boss wins again with a painful leg submission. DeLucia is understandably disappointed. After all, this time he lost in just 1.5 minutes, faster than the first fight. But the Lion's Den fighter, for some reason, decided that his lucky number was 3. A year later, he decided to challenge Rutten again. Boss was already a champion by then and had a plan for how he wanted to deal with Jason. Unfortunately, the fight didn't go exactly to plan, and you will see why. In the third match, DeLucia realized that he was not previously successful on the ground and decided to fight Boss standing. But nothing good awaited him here. In a controversial moment, Rutten struck Jason's upper chest with his fist, using skills he learned over the years of studying Kyokushin karate. But Jason protests, claiming that the blow struck his throat. On the replay, it's hard to see who is right and who is not. But Rutten received a warning. According to Pancrase rules, you can hit the body with the fist, only strike the head with an open palm. Jason didn't know if he could win this time around and was happy to cause any trouble that he could for the champion. But Boss knows that DeLucia cannot be underestimated. Many have already paid for it. However, the difference in the power of the blows between the two fighters was extreme. DeLucia was afraid to even block Rutten's strikes. Jason did manage to break through Rutten's defenses several times. After doing so, Boss realized that it was time to fight seriously. The Dutchman delivers several blows to his opponent's body and follows with palm strikes. One of the punches was deflected by DeLucia's defense and landed inappropriately, leading to the referee warning Boss again. Jason is in no hurry to set the record straight. Boss turns up the aggression and unleashes heavy blows, and inadvertently strikes Jason's throat again. He admits his mistake, saying, "I'm sorry, I missed." Although Rutten will later say that he actually hit the chest, and DeLucia claimed that it was his throat. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Boss backed off a little, and DeLucia taunted that it didn't fit his warrior image, which he had displayed in his other fights. Now, fired up, Rutten becomes seriously aggressive. Another crazy attack from Rutten, with body punches and a middle kick, knocks DeLucia down. Jason claims that he was hit in the groin and not in the body in an attempt to interfere with Boss's success. Moving on, the enraged Boss punches 2 sliding blows with his hands into Jason's body, making him collapse with pain. Somehow he manages to rise again, but in vain. Here we see one of the most terrifying body knockouts in MMA history. Jason suffered a liver rupture from these punches. This is why Pancrase fights were much more difficult than the standard MMA rules. In the UFC, DeLucia would have lost to Rutten after the first knockdown, but in Pancrase he was counted out knockdown after knockdown. Jason put psychological pressure on Boss both during and after the fight. In the book, Total MMA, he stated that Rutten only fought comfortable opponents, and that the Pancrase leadership allegedly wanted to make Rutten a star. In other words, DeLucia hinted that he was being forced to fight Rutten. However, it could be said that Boss Rutten needed no outside help, which was even confirmed by Guy Metzger, Jason's teammate. Jason was a great fighter, but he could not accept the fact that he constantly lost to Boss. In Boss's fight with Maurice Smith, everything changed dramatically. Boss would have had good reason to be nervous since Maurice was on a completely different level as a world kickboxing champion and K1 veteran. Rutten has never achieved world champion status in kickboxing, but in Pancrase, Boss had more experience and a solid counterattack plan. Maurice easily blocks Rutten's high kick. Boss works more aggressively, but is a little unsure. Smith lost his balance and fell, with Boss following him down for a grapple and a leg hold. Maurice grabs the ropes. The fighters are reset and Maurice goes on the attack. Boss uses a clinch, then drags Maurice to the ground. There he delivers a painful blow to the leg and a knee bar, which forces Smith to submit. It was clear that Maurice Smith was an inexperienced fighter when it came to wrestling. Another great win for Boss. 6 months later, they met again. Rutten decided he was ready to fight the elite kickboxer while standing. Boss responds to Maurice's low kick with a front kick and knocks Smith back. Now, Maurice escapes by taking Boss to the ground with a spectacular takedown. The fighters wrestle for a moment before moving back to their feet. This left hook to the liver was definitely felt by Smith. Boss attempts an upside-down knee bar, but Smith escapes with the ropes. Maurice tries to keep his distance, but Boss pushes him and holds him against the ropes. Now Rutten drags his opponent to the ground. There are several submission attempts, showing that his skill on the ground is still greater than that of the world kickboxing champion. Maurice makes a mistake, allowing Boss to take his back. The Dutchman applies a rear naked choke, and that ends the fight. Boss next had a showdown with the fierce Guy Mezger, a basic karate, world kickboxing champion, world champion of the UFC 4, and an honored fighter with the Lion's Den. Boss starts with his signature hurricane front kick, but Guy clinches and takes the fight to the ground. Mezger's fighting style was on a different level than Rutten's previous opponents. Mezger throws a dangerous high kick that has knocked down many of his rivals. Boss responds with a series of palm punches. The Lion's Den fighter seems stunned, and he responds with a Yura Mawashi. Throughout the fight, Boss consistently looks better on his feet, but every time the fight went to the ground, Mezger was clearly confident in his technique. Still, Boss has a good defense against Mezger's grappling and managed to survive on the floor. By this point, the fight has lasted 19 minutes. Guy somersaults, hoping to apply a knee bar, but Boss turns the tables, getting Mezger into a painful leg submission. It hurts to even look at. Rutten injured Guy, which he did not want to do since they are friends, but alas, this is a tough sport. Boss just grabbed the opponent's foot and with his hands twisted it in a strange angle, causing Mezger to tap out. The next fight we look at is from 1998, Boss Rutten versus Kengo Watanabe. Boss was prepared to leave Pancrase and head to the USA for his UFC debut. Guy Mezger suggested that he stay for one more fight with a promising newcomer, an offer that Rutten could not refuse. It was Kengo's debut in Pancrase, and a risky maneuver for him to take on a seasoned champion like Rutten. Boss also took a risk in this fight, hoping not to be injured before his planned move to the UFC. Rickson Gracie was also in the arena that evening, sitting ringside to watch the match. Boss opens with a sharp middle kick to the body. Kengo tries to escape in a clinch but ends up receiving even more heavy body punches. Boss was more aggressive throughout this fight. A knee strike and a hard right hook knocked the Japanese fighter down. He gets up and goes on the attack, but the Pancrase star knocks him down again with his signature blow. It's hard to believe, but Kengo rises again and continues the fight. Kengo's fate, however, seems sealed. Another series of punches finishes him off in what could be called one of Boss Rutten's most aggressive fights. He was in great shape in this fight, and Kango Watanabe was no match for the seasoned veteran. We now go back in time to when Boss faced one of the stars of the UFC, Frank Shamrock. This fight was the final match of their trilogy. Frank was the interim Pancrase champion at the time, and Shamrock and Rutten had already met twice. In the first fight, the decision went to Shamrock, and in the second fight, it went to Rutten. The third fight was supposed to determine the ultimate victor in their confrontation. The bell rang. A great high kick from Boss, but Frank clinches it. There is a powerful throw into the north-south position, but Boss breaks out and the fighters return to their feet. We see a heavy low kick, and Shamrock provokes his opponent. Frank tries another clinch, and they move to the floor. But in the end, Boss is too strong physically. There is a knee to the head from Rutten, something that you don't often see in the UFC. Boss continues to kick, and Frank responds with yet another takedown, in what is turning out to be a great fight between these two strikers. Boss knocks down Shamrock with a wrist strike. Shamrock, who is dazed, tries to knock out Boss's pivot leg. Rutten throws punches to the head. Shamrock pushes, and both fighters fell through the ropes out of the ring. The Dutchman is the first to return to the ring, and Frank crawls in with difficulty. He received a lot of punches, and it's not easy for him to go on. The fight continues in one of Pancrase's most spectacular matches. Boss's blows were top-notch, and by this time, Shamrock had exhausted himself with his spectacular throws. Boss sets up a knee to the head, that barely misses Frank's face. Frank, now tired, moves the fight to the ground, but Boss sees it and punishes the guy with his punches. In a more funnier moment, Shamrock begins to tease Rutten and make faces. Boss continues to slap his opponent, intentionally aiming for the cut above his eye. At one point, Boss strikes his opponent with his fist and is warned by the referee. In an attempt to move to the ground by Shamrock, Boss defends himself and even delivers a knee to the head. He catches Frank in a guillotine that cuts off his oxygen. Frank falls and has difficulty getting up while the referee is counting. The toll of the knockdown, missed hits, and his fatigue finally finishes Shamrock off. Despite the fact that he was ready to continue, the referee stops the fight due to the cut he had received. Boss Rutten wins the trilogy. This is one of the most famous Pancrase fights, one of the most spectacular, and one of our favorites. The defeat only hardened Frank Shamrock, and in the end, he would only become stronger, later adding the UFC title to his portfolio. Next up, a showdown with Osami Shibuya, an extremely athletic fighter who had previously fought with Boss. However, the first fight ended in a draw when Rutten suffered a serious chest injury. This time, Boss planned to finish the fight quickly. Osami attempts to move the fight to the ground, but Boss quickly catches him in a guillotine, then lets go and strikes the body with a knee. Osami Shibuya was overconfident and fell into Rutten's trap. Boss performs a body crunch submission, which suffocates his opponent, bringing the fight to an end. One of the most outstanding pain techniques in history. In 1996, Boss Rutten finally got the matchup he had been seeking for years. A rematch with Masakatsu Funaki, the king of Japanese catch wrestling, a Pancrase founder, and a man who defeated him in 1994. Unlike Minoru Suzuki, Funaki weighed over 90 kilos, was extremely athletic. He possessed a strong kick and an excellent technique on the ground. Funaki was one of only 2 people to defeat Ken Shamrock in Pancrase. He performed technical submissions that no one had seen before, and now he planned to finish Rutten. Boss recalls that Masakatsu walked up to him before the fight and made a throat-cutting gesture, hinting that he would finish him off. At that moment, Rutten realized that he would need to beat Funaki like never before. But the Japanese fighter's wrestling skill was still light years ahead of Boss's skills, so this would be one of the toughest fights of his life. The fight opens with a powerful low kick from Boss. Funaki defends himself and bides his time. Then there is a hard kick from Funaki and the fight goes to the ground. The Japanese fighter goes for Boss's leg and tries to give a painful blow to the Achilles, but then switches to a brutal foot twist. Despite Boss's leg being twisted, he holds out and later admitted that it was miraculous he did not tap out. The referee resets the fight. Boss is hunting for a head strike, but Funaki moves the fight to the ground again. Masakatsu worked well on the ground, but let his guard down for a moment and allowed Boss to get up. Boss throws a great combination and an accurate kick. Funaki is not doing well on his feet. He receives a knee to the body but doesn't give up. In this exchange, the strongest blow was thrown by Funaki, who got a second wind. Masakatsu tried to hit Ruten's leg to no avail. The champion continues to throw punches while standing. His plan was to drag out the fight, since Funaki never fought longer than 15 minutes. Ruten throws off Funaki. Masakatsu flies at him with blows, but runs into a counterattack. Boss is being ruthless, and throws a strong palm blow, knocking Funaki down. The Japanese fighter gets up. Funaki attempts another transfer to the ground, but an accurate finishing blow from Boss forces the referee to count another knockdown. Masakatsu prepares for the final clash in this fight. The Dutch puncher strikes Funaki in the corner, but the fight continues. There's a high kick from Masakatsu, who is clearly fatigued. After an effective series of punches, Funaki is back on the floor. Even though it looks like the end, the Japanese fighter gets back to his feet, wanting to fight to his last breath. A powerful knee strike to the head. Ruten is putting everything he has into these punches, but Masakatsu is still on his feet. He grabs the ropes and the referee separates the fighters. Boss looks fatigued as the fight is already past 17 minutes. Despite the fact that the Japanese veteran appears to be losing, he only cares about his fans and refuses to give up. Funaki flies at Ruten. They are in a clinch now, with heavy palm and knee blows delivered by the Dutchman. A final knee strike, and Funaki could no longer stand. Boss Ruten is completely exhausted as well. Funaki gets up but falls for the final time, and Ruten is declared the winner. Boss admitted that he was also on the verge of total exhaustion. This fight with Masakatsu is still considered by many to be the best fight in Pancrase history.